Hello, everyone. This is Nidhi from Designhill, your host for today. I hope each one of you are keeping well and safe, taking all the precautions, taking care of your near and dear ones, and everyone around in these testing times. Welcome again to yet another event by Designhill. And today we will be discussing the business of podcasting, tips, trends, and strategies to follow in 2021. This event is brought to you by Designhill, world's leading creative marketplace that caters to the creative needs of businesses and individuals alike, who can source high quality designs from professional designers. Through its print on demand marketplace called Print Shop by Designhill, you can also buy 50 plus unique products with thousands of artworks created by a world class community of independent artists. So, moving ahead, let me introduce our speakers for today. We have with us Billy Samoa. Billy is the co founder and CEO of Podify. The mission is to produce content that will inspire action for the of humanity by sharing insights that help illustrate how the choices we make have an impact on our life and our planet. He's the creator and host of Inside Out, a show dedicated to revealing and dissecting life changing insights. He interviews best selling authors, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders to ask them to share their most powerful insights and break them down so they can be applied in lives of his audiences. Billy, would you like to say a quick hi to the audiences? You are on
I
mute,
had to
yes.
unmute, but yes, hello, and thank you for having me, Nidhi, and everyone at Design Hill. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited for the conversation. Thank you.
We're equally excited. Thanks for joining us today. Next, we have David Schreiner Khan. After 28 years as a highly skilled employee, David was told that his job was over. In spite of the immediate trauma and fear, he knew that as his next step, he'd rather work for himself and have more control over his destiny. That was in 2006. Today, David is a thriving entrepreneur, podcaster, and speaker. He's guiding highly skilled professionals who are recovering from a late career job loss and who yearn to impact the world with their knowledge and creativity by becoming successful consultants and coaches. David,
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm look forward to this conversation and hope that we can help all of you who want to create greater impact with your content.
amazing. Um, Up next, we have Jeremy Ryan Slate. Jeremy Slate is the founder of the Create Your Own Life podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world. He studied literature at Oxford University and is a former champion powerlifter turned new media entrepreneur. He specializes in using podcast and new media to create trust and opening leader status. In iTunes, he was ranked number one in the business category and ranked 78th in the top 100. Jeremy was named one of the top 26 podcasts for entrepreneurs to listen to in 2017-18 by CIO magazine. The Create Your Own Life podcast has been downloaded over 2.5 million times. After his success in podcasting, Jeremy and his wife founded Command Your Brand to help leaders use the power of podcasts to change the world. Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm just really stoked to, be here and share the stage with a lot of really awesome people and, hopefully help out the people out there listening today.
Amazing. Um, Next, we have Joey Price. Joey is an award winning human resource executive, business coach, thought leader, and professor. He's the founder of Jumpstart HR LLC, an HR consulting practice specifically for small businesses and startups, and host of Business Life and Coffee, a weekly podcast on personal and professional development. As the CEO of Jumpstart HR LLC, Joy innovates by creating HR solutions for small business owners and startup founders who want to build better, more competitive businesses. As a podcaster on the Business Life and Coffee show, Joy shares carefully curated conversations on personal finance, psychology, professional development, and business for emerging professionals and business owners alike. Joy is a recent HR Executive magazine top HR tech influencer, one of the Forbes magazine's Kevin Cruise's top 100 employee engagement experts in the world. That's amazing. Joy, please say hi.
Well, hello everyone,
Welcome.
and thanks for having me. I'm excited to share my perspective on the business of podcasting through the lens of the subject matter expert turned podcaster slash podcast producer.
Lovely to have you here. Last but not the least, we have Thomas Cagley, also known as Tom Cagley, who is a consultant, speaker, author, coach, and agile guide who leads organizations and teams to unlock their inherent greatness. He has developed estimation models and has supported organizations developing classic and agile estimates. Tom helps teams and organizations improve cycle time, productivity, quality, morale, and customer satisfaction, and then prove it. Tom is an internationally respected blogger and podcaster for over 11 years, focusing on software process and measurement. His blog and entries and podcasts have been listened to or read well over 1 million times. He co-authored Mastering Software Project Management, Best Practices, Tools and Techniques with Murali K. Chemuturi. Tom penned the chapter titled Agile Estimation Using Functional Metrics in the IFPUG Guide to IT and Software Measurement. Tom, that's really amazing. Please say a quick hi to the audiences. I guess you're on mute. Are you on mute, Tom, by any chance? Can everyone else hear Tom?
No.
Okay, what happened all of a sudden, Tom? Oh, okay, he's gonna join us back again, no problem. Thank you so much, each one of you, for taking out time from your schedule and joining us today for this panel discussion. It's an honor to have you here with us. Tom, can you say something?
I can say something. Can you hear something?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can finally. Please say hi to the audience and introduce
I
yourself.
hate when the microphone dies. Looking forward to this conversation. It'll be a lot of fun. By the way, it's not 11 years, it's 15 years. And, it's just been a while. So all in, let us have a wonderful time and let's educate each other and everybody in the audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So great, guys. Before we start the session, I have a couple of announcements to make. We are giving away certificates to the attendees who would stick till the end of the session. So please do not miss out on this chance and stay tuned till the end. Also, you can take a screenshot of this event and post it on your Twitter handles, tagging Designhill DH using hashtag Designhill events. Also, you have to tag all our speakers' Twitter handles, which will be right there in the chat box by my colleague Harshita. One lucky winner will have a chance to win a print shop gift card worth $50. Also, we will be sharing exclusive coupon codes with everyone at the end of the session, using which you can avail 15% off on Designhill contest service to build your brand. So stay tuned. So before we start the session, let's quickly look at what Designhill is all about.
Need to get your parents off your back? Head to the world's #1 creative marketplace, Designhill.
When I started my photography business, I needed something that said this was more than just a hobby. It's not a hobby, Mom. That's why I went to Designhill and got an amazing logo super fast at a price I could afford. The process was easy using Designhill's logo maker. Just enter the name of your business, then pick out a number of designs that inspire you. I'll pick designs that inspire you. I'll pick this one and that one looks cute. Then pick your colors or let the system decide. Add some more info like a slogan, the industry your business is in, and your budget. The logo maker, using machine learning and artificial intelligence, will design thousands of logo variants that you can choose from and adapt. In fact, I was able to get everything from business cards to t-shirt design and complete social media kit, all with the click of a button. With that, I'm all set. Now everyone I meet knows I'm a legit photographer. Even my mom. It's real. That's decaf.
Let the world know it's real and build your brand with Designhill.
All right, we're all set to start the session. And to the attendees, guys, we will take up questions during the session. So if you have any, please feel free to write them down in the questions tab, which we will take up towards the end of the session. So I'm right away jumping on the questions that we have from our registrants, and we will start with you, David. In the last few years, content marketing has fundamentally changed, with podcast becoming one of the most sought after mediums for content consumption. And it is also one of the most convenient and flexible options. How do you see the setting of podcasts with other content marketing types like blogs, video, emails, etc.? And
Uh,
how can, yeah,
I was
please
going
go
to say
ahead.
the advice that I offer to people that are getting started with content creation is to pick the channel that's most comfortable for you
Yeah.
and easiest for you to get started with, and then get really get comfortable and get proficient in that channel. Don't try to do everything all at once, otherwise you'll be overwhelmed. For me, I discovered fairly early on that podcasting worked well for me, so I stuck with it. The other thing about podcasting compared to other types of content creation is audio storytelling has a very intimate quality. So particularly if you're thinking about an interview-based show like mine are, you can create some very intimate conversations that you end up getting to share with the world. And I think video doesn't quite do the same thing.
All right, so we actually have a strict comparison between video marketing and podcast marketing, and that we will cover up in a bit of a time. Um, Joey, let's ask you. I mean, how do you integrate podcast content into an already existing content marketing scheme that an organization may have, and with along with other brand assets like you market through blog, social media. So how does podcast find its place, and also is it like is it feasible for every business to deal in all of these content marketing channels, including podcasts?
A great series of questions. It's feasible to be in all of the content platforms, but the question is, should you be in those
Yeah.
platforms? And the answer is probably no. So I would take a look at, who are we in the business to serve? Where are we looking to find our market? Where are they already congregating? And then figure out your platform and your attack from there. Now, the way that podcasting can incorporate into your content marketing strategy and what we're doing is the podcast is a way for people to learn our brand, like our brand, trust our brand, and to even share some free nuggets that might entice them to want to work with us. And we try not to recreate the wheel by getting some of our podcast content in bite-sized pieces and then applying them to our content calendar. So you may see quotes in text on an Instagram page. You may see video snippets on a Twitter feed. You may see that there's a particular topic that I was talking about on the podcast that may turn into a longer form article on LinkedIn. So it's all about, for me, time is valuable, and you really want to drill deep on an issue, I think, as opposed to just being all over the map. So I'll start with one theme, and then you'll see it percolate through other pieces of content.
Absolutely. And Tom, I'd like to ask you. So, when someone sets out to do a podcast, having an interest in starting a podcast is one thing, but how does a business identify that podcast is something that we can give a try? What are the factors that a business considers while deciding and zeroing down on podcast as a marketing content marketing channel?
I do think it absolutely depends on who your audience is and where they're consuming. So content obviously is king, but if you're trying to reach people that have no interest in podcasting, so the C-level execs, many of them that I deal with wouldn't listen to a podcast unless it was from NPR. Period. So independent podcaster can't reach them. The people that I'm working directly with, the practitioners, they consume a ton of them. So again, the question is, who are you attempting to talk to?
Right.
Use that as the driver as to whether or not podcasting is the right answer.
Right. Absolutely. And with that, I have a question for our live attendees. So you have been attending Design Hill's event for quite a long time now. It's been a year. We started it. Would you like to have Design Hill start a podcast? And would you be interested? Would you be like, be active there? Would you have some interest in there so we can, just to gauge your interest, do tell me in the chat section while I get on to my next question. So next question is for Billy. Billy, more people are listening to podcasts than ever before. From 2019 to 2020, the percentage has only been increasing. And I will not get into stats because I really get confused with the numbers. But what has increased the listenership of podcast other than the content? I mean, content is one thing. I'm sure that you have to constantly keep developing fresh content. You have to sort through the recording schedules and everything else. But what other than the content contributes to the listenership of a podcast?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of factors at play. And I think this last year has been a unique year. You touched on the content piece, and there is a influx of content. But I think audio content generally is in vogue right now. If you look at a platform like Clubhouse, for example, which is a social interactive audio platform, people are drawn to what I'll call a passive listening media, where you can do other things while listening. And I think that creates a great way for us to gather information and at the same time do other things, whether that be go to the grocery store, be at the gym. And I don't know if your question was more geared towards how do we get more listeners or why are people listening? Can you be more specific on that?
Yes. So my question was actually about listenership. What increases the listenership of a podcast, which eventually means how do you gain more listeners to a
Got it.
podcast? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of what's been said already, you have to know where
Yeah.
your audience is. So by that, I mean, where do they hang out? Are they on Reddit? Or are they on Twitter? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn? And there's any number of places. Know where they are so that you can then hang out with them and get to know them and let them know that you exist. Because without that, they're not going to be able to find you. And I think fundamentally, the best podcasters and the ones that reach their audience, they know where their audience is. So that's a big piece of it. Another big piece of it is podcast listeners listen to podcasts. So if you go on other podcasts, like I know everyone on this stage does, guess what? You're going to be exposed to other audiences. So that's a really, really big piece that we should all be thinking of as we want to build our audience. So those are a couple of things that will be helpful.
Thank you so much for that insight, Billy. Jeremy, I'm gonna ask this question slightly. So I'm gonna straight away ask this question from the registrants list, where our registrants were very keen to know that there are already so many podcasts out there. How do you set a podcast apart in the vast landscape of shows that are already there? So any tips on there?
Well, I think first and foremost, you really have to differentiate from what is out there, because I think so many times there's people that see one or two ways a show works, where they interview somebody, ask them a couple questions, ask them, like a same rote list of questions that they ask everybody. So it's not very different, right? So there's no reason that you stand out and you're memorable. So I always tell people, like, unless there's a particular reason that you're different or a way that makes you different, I wouldn't consider starting a podcast. You want to find out that thing that is your differentiating characteristic and really hammer that home. But take a look at what's in the market, take a look at what other people are doing, take a look at what interests you. But at the same time, I have an interview show myself, and I'm always telling people, I have an interview on Monday and Wednesday, and on Friday it's a content piece for me.
Yeah.
And it's usually something that I'm talking about. So people will come back to see what I have to say or see what my viewpoints are on things. And if you're not giving people that, once again, you're not giving yourself a way to stand out. So you really want to give people a way to get you and understand you and see how you're different, because otherwise there's really no reason to start. You're going to get drowned out by a lot of the shows that are already out there.
Right, absolutely agreed. So next question again is about, like I said, that a majority of business communities on Design Hill, they are early age startups and who have just started out in their own spaces. So if they want to start a podcast, what are the costs associated with starting a podcast, and what are some some of the affordable podcast tools to start with? So David, let's start with you.
Well, for one thing, you need a good mic. You need a computer. You need good internet access. Audio quality is really important. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on a microphone, but you do need a microphone. And if you have a show with guests, your guests also need to have good quality equipment. And again, it's not a lot of money, but that's one of the basic things, to start with your equipment.
All right, all right. Billy, Joey, Thomas, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I think a lot of times there's a misconception that starting a podcast costs a lot of money. To David's point, it doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money. You could edit it yourself, and that takes time, but it doesn't take money. Now, you could outsource that to a company. There's plenty of them. I have a company, tons of people have companies to help people with their podcast. But the reality is you can do it all yourself. And so I think what David mentioned is the starting and getting to his point. It doesn't need to be the best mic ever, but any external mic is better than using your computer mic. Make sure you use headphones. Make sure you invest in something that will help you record. And one piece of advice I'll give, if you're doing remote recordings, use a platform like Squadcast or Riverside. These will allow you to get great audio that's recorded locally, even better than Zoom, because Zoom, it just records over the internet and it's just not as good quality. And so when you use a platform like Squadcast, it records your audio tracks locally and gives you a better overall sound recording. Other than that, the investment is time, and how much you repurpose your content to other social media platforms, it just requires more time. And then, everything that goes into it, publishing it and writing your show notes, all of that is more labor cost as opposed to hard costs like buying the microphone. But David mentioned all the things that you need to buy, and I'll pass it back to you, Nidhi.
Can I add one thing to what Billy said? Because
yes,
this is
please.
it's just really important. Like one thing too, and I'm sure like everybody here has seen this happen. Like sometimes you have a guest on, and even though they have a mic, you can and you're not seeing them, you can still tell what the room that they're in looks like. There's nothing on the walls, there's nothing on the floors, and there's nothing on the ceiling. So like even having a really good area rug in the middle of a room gives us a sound someplace to stop. Because when you're in a room and sound has a chance to bounce around, it just makes it really hard to get a good recording.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, unless you do that, you're going to end up having to try to take care of it with a mixer, and that's not a lot of fun.
I'll just add one quick thing because it's such a good point, and we're all like, okay. Sound recording. There's really 3 levers. The first one is your equipment. Everyone thinks about that, and it's important, but I'm going to put that aside because any microphone is better than no microphone. The 2 other levers is your recording environment, which Jeremy just touched on. Think about it like this. Think if you were to take a line across your ears and everything in front of you, create a cocoon of things that will block your sound waves. I have pillows, like literally, I have pillows all around me to block my sound. It's super ad hoc, but it helps to create a better recording environment. And the last thing is mic technique. Okay. When I say that, what I mean is get close to your microphones. People are talking way back here. It's not as good as getting right up in your mic, and listen closely and test and see how it sounds. So again, your mic technique, the recording environment. And by the way, if you have fans and air conditioner and all these other things that are creating a hum in the background, you got to shut those down. That's the recording environment. And then of course your microphone. So just, I think that's something that a lot of people could do. It's not hard to do. And if you're with a guest, tell them, hey, can you maybe pick another room, or all sorts of other things, or maybe talk a little bit closer to your microphone, and it's going to get the guest to have better sound as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing.
Yes.
Really doubling down. The equipment matters less than you think it does. I know sometimes we can have analysis paralysis around, do I get this mic versus that mic? Do I spend a couple more dollars to get this level, pop filter or what have you? When people are listening to your podcast, or if they're viewing your podcast, the most important question that they're going to have is, do I have a connection with the guest? Do I have a connection with the person that they're interviewing? And that's what you really want to focus your time on, is being transparent, being vulnerable, putting together a show that people resonate with. That's the most important thing. Now, audio is the most important technical piece of it, because you're in somebody's ears for 30 minutes to 2 hours. You want to make sure that that comes across clean. But they're not going to listen to you. You can have the greatest sound. You can record at the greatest sound studio. But if you don't have a podcast people want to listen to, they're not going to listen to it. So just make sure that you have something that's engaging, that captures your audience, and that trumps everything else.
And just one more thing to that, Joey, because that's a really good point as well. Like think about like being in people's ears, like which is really vital. And I don't know, like I'm always listening to something in my earbuds. So like I know it's a really cheap software, but I found we've used it like for 6 years now, but it's called Auphonic, and it helps with sound leveling, even if you're doing it cheaply, because when you listen to an episode and the leveling is off, oh man, it's painful. Like, wow, why is the music so loud? And why are the voices so low? And why is that guy louder and that guy softer? So from a listening experience, it's really hard, but that's like, I think it's like $11 a month for like 10 hours. But like leveling your sound is a game changer.
Yeah, I agree 100% on the Auphonic. And very frankly, I use the desktop version, but especially if you're recording in chunks, right? I do a number of different segments, slam them all together, and the envelopes are different. That takes care of that.
Amazing. Some really good insights, and I especially loved when Billy said that sound blocking through those pillows. I mean, you have to make the best of what you have, and also how Joey said that the equipment is less important than the content and the engagement, the value that you create. So I hope all the attendees are making notes of this, because this was also the most asked questions. How much money it's gonna cost, and so what is the kind of investment that is needed. I hope it has answered your questions, guys. So moving ahead, so if someone wants to start a podcast or slowly wants to build the momentum by including some guests who could add to the value that the podcast is generating, uh, as an early on podcaster, how to find and reach out to the right guests and influencers and convince them, because sometimes the kind of guests that you get on your podcast really matters a lot, and it is a marketing, like it's a marketing hack in itself. So how does one go about researching the right guests and to get them on board? How does one convince them, especially if they are the people who generally charge? So David, can we start with you?
It's really simple, actually. Start with your network. Start with who's already in your network, who knows you, and is likely to say yes if you ask them for something. So the first thing is ask people in your network that you think would be good guests to be on. And you can then, after you've interviewed them, ask them who else they know who might be a good fit. And if you have a particular kind of someone with celebrity status in your field of expertise, you can say, I would like to reach out to somebody like so-and-so.
Yeah.
Do you know that person, or do you know somebody like that? And just keep working your network, and you will find that you will reach people that have notoriety in your field fairly quickly. One of the things I found from being a podcaster is that most people want to talk about themselves, and doesn't matter how well known you are, how little known you are. Most people want to talk about themselves, and I have found that most people, whether they charge a lot of money for their speaking time or not, they usually will say yes to be on a podcast. And again, going back to a comment I put in chat, if you're consistent and frequent with your episodes, so it's really important to have a content calendar, but if you're consistent and frequent, then potential guests will see that you're serious. It makes a big difference in whether people will say yes or not.
I totally agree. I'll just add something real quick. Oh, go ahead, Joey. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
All right, cool. Just real quick. One thing I'll caution you about getting that celebrity guest on your show is that when you think about the podcast listener that's tuning into your show, you want them to be a repeat listener. Yeah. So if you are the host, producer, moderator, person in control, person setting the tone for the experience, you want to make sure that that experience feels just as good, or that other experiences feel just as good as that one episode. Because if you have this one dynamic interview with this one super celebrity guest, and then the rest of your episodes aren't great, you may have a bump or a spike in listeners because they're tuned into that name. but you won't have people that tune into your brand long term. So super important to understand, interview dynamics, how to navigate conversation, transition in and out of things, and make sure that you're a good interviewer in general, so that you could pick someone off the street and have them share a good and compelling story, versus having to rely on your talent to carry it, and they'll thank you for making an effortless interview.
I love that. I'll add that, remember this, it's about them and not you. And what I mean by that is, think about it from this perspective. If you find someone who's releasing a book, has a movie coming out, has something to promote, they're a great candidate. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when you reach out to them, don't make it all about you. Find something very, very specific about them that you can highlight, and try to think of something that they haven't heard before, right? If they always get the same compliment because of some book they wrote, don't give them a general, oh, I love your book because of blah, blah, blah. Like, take something from their book that you read and like highlight a very specific part of it and why it was so impactful to you. And then you could say something about your podcast to see if they have interest in coming on. But again, make it more about them and less about you. And to the earlier points, as you start to have these people come on your show, you begin to establish yourself and create more of a credibility baseline for them to see that you are legitimate and that you have other people that you've interviewed. And because of that, that's going to create a more likely chance that they're going to say yes to you, because they see that you've interviewed other people at their level. And when that happens, you can start to highlight those people as well. Like, oh, here are a few of my past interviews, so that they know, okay, you've interviewed some legit people.
Can I add something to that too? Because I know
Absolutely.
Joey made a good point and Billy also made a good point. So I want to add to both of those. First to Joey's point, is he talked about having a celebrity guest on, you want to make sure you're a good interviewer. I know for me, we're closing on 850 episodes. I didn't feel like I was a good interviewer until I was around 200. And it's something I've always worked on. So I've developed a method for myself around that. One of the things is finding other interviews people have done, and listening to how they communicate, because that's really important. Do they answer short? Do they answer long? Do they pause? What's there? How do they tell stories? Stuff like that is really important to know. And that doesn't mean you have to listen to 10 interviews they've done. So that's really helped me in terms of preparation. And then also, when we've reached out to people, when I first started, I made a list of the top 100 people I most admired, and we reached out to a lot of those people. So we had a lot of success in doing that. We've had former CIA director David Petraeus on. We've had former Yankee Nick Swisher on. So I've really tried to work with doing, a lot of things like that, and really having great interviewing skills around that. And I had a point to what Billy said, and I totally forgot it. My mind has went blank, so I apologize.
I'll just say this. Jeremy's done so many interviews that I've listened to so many of your interviews for guests that have been on my show to do exactly what you just highlighted.
Wow.
So I just want to pay you that compliment. And you're amazing, man. And I just want to say,
thank you.
You extract great things from your guests. And as a result, I'm listening. I never want to duplicate what's been done before, but when I hear answers and there's something that I can extract from an answer and ask it in a new or unique way, I will. But I think it's a great point to understand who you're interviewing, and then you can understand your approach for that person based on hearing other interviews. So great job, Ryan.
I appreciate that too, Billy, because and that's a good point, because how many times do you have a guest on and they do the exact same interview everywhere because everybody asks them the exact same questions. So it's important to know who they are, what they like to talk about, what they don't like to talk about, what's pertinent. Right. I had Dale Earnhardt's daughter Kelly on the show last year, and she hates the question about what's it like being a woman in racing. So I said, I know you hate getting the question about what's it like being a woman in racing. So I'm going to ask you a different question around that. She's like, oh, I like you already. But that's really important.
Yeah. And we're here discussing the business of podcasting, right? So in everything we say, you have to tie it to, well, how do I want this to increase either my personal brand or my corporate brand, or add to our bottom line? When you bring a guest on, I think I saw in the chat, someone said that, oh yeah, David said that guests with less notoriety may be more likely to share your episode. You're looking for reach. You're looking to get more eyes and ears on what it is that you're doing for the purpose of the podcast, but also for the purpose of your business too.
Right.
And so all of your interactions matter, not just when you're interacting with your guest on the show, but what is your guest onboarding process like? Do you thank them afterwards? Do you follow up with them in 6 months and say, hey, here's what we've been working on? You know, these are business development tools. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking, okay, well, how's this action, if I do it well, how's that going to impact my business? And how might this interaction, if I do it wrong, negatively impact my business?
As a side note, I remember what I was going to say to what Billy said, because you made a really good point about like it's about them and it's not about you. And you need to understand that when you're reaching out. When I reach out to somebody, I always talk about, number one, the purpose of what I'm doing, why it matters to them, and why what they're doing matters to me. And then you mentioned like talking about people you previously had in the show. Like day one, like I had nobody on the show, but I had somebody say yes. So when that pitch, I had a couple people say, and I would say, interviews scheduled include. So like you can always find a way to get creative with how you're pitching.
Right, absolutely. These are some really, really precise insights. And thank you so much for sharing your own journey, Jeremy. And Thomas, I saw you were trying to say something. Did we miss out on anything?
No, but the one thing I do think that you should consider, right, is especially if you can arrange it. Over the past 15 years, I normally can, is talk to the person you're going to interview either before, perhaps a call up front, so that you know how they'll answer questions, get a sense as to how they interact, or at least a few minutes before you turn the recorder on. Again, let them relax. I get some people that have never been on before, mixture, right? Get them to relax, but also so that you understand how you will interact with them, because you can hack a thing up pretty badly by interacting incorrectly with someone.
Amazing. I'm not sure if with such detailed answers, we have a lot of questions, and like David was actually saying that we may not be able to cover all the questions, but we will try our level best. So before we break for the mid-roll, let's take one last question before the mid-roll. So now when you have you are over that initial experience of setting and setting a podcast, you have your recording schedules and time in place and times, you are constantly generating fresh content, and the value that your first set of listeners are consistently liking as well. How does one crack the marketing part and grow that word of mouth and constantly reach out to a newer audience base and the right audience base? Tom, can we start with you?
So I obviously leverage my guests as a medium as to expand. I also do a lot of professional speaking. So given that, I bring it up, I plant it with my clients. So I use my my natural ebb and flow in the places that I go to actually go virtually these days, to actually make those connections and build the brand market using mostly word of mouth. And that works for me.
All right.
The one thing I'll add to that is going back to this theme of make it about the guest. When you are done with the show, one, you shouldn't have expectation that they're going to promote your show, but you should make it easy for them to promote your show and give them something about them that will make them look great. So if you have a repurposed piece of content, make it short, like sub 1 minute, I think is great if you can, because that's where everything's going, whether Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, it's all going short form content, and make it a soundbite that makes them look really good. And then use platforms like Click to Tweet. So all they have to do is press a button and then they could tweet it. But again, think about it from their perspective. What would inspire them to want to share some of your content? The easier you can make it, the better.
Yeah,
that's a huge point. Oh, go ahead, Joey.
I was just going to say some practical ways that we do that. Quotes that the individual said on the show that really stood out or that resonated, and then their face. Just put their face on the graphic, and people love to see billboards of themselves. So make it look excellent, and they'll likely share it.
Like we do a lot of like video teasers, with captions and stuff on them, because I think those are great. They're powerful. We have some background music behind them, which comes out really well, because I know, like to Billy's point, like to just, here's your link, your episode is live. Like, okay, cool. I'm going to post this on Facebook, or I'm going to post this on Instagram. And a lot of those platforms downrank links anyway, because they don't want you to leave the platform. So you have to also think of, how am I going to work with what I got here?
Absolutely. So, David, you have anything to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Reiterating what some of the other panelists have already said, make it easy for the guests. We send them a long email several times, which includes things that they can very easily share. So we don't just send them the link. We actually write content for every single episode that's specific to the guest. So it makes it easy for them to share.
Yeah.
Right. Yes,
I was
please.
just gonna really quickly. So we're focusing on the guest, and that's a huge part of it too. I think it's healthy to have realistic expectations of your growth pattern. You know, if you're not, A-Rod, J-Lo, President Obama and Bruce Springsteen, you're not just going to from day one have 1 million downloads. But I think for folks like us who may be, going into this space without, being a household name, you're really going to grow one-to-one. So send people individualized DM messages, remind people, hey, I have a podcast, let them know. Because I bet even if any of us pulled our Instagram feeds or our Twitter feeds and said, hey, did you know that I have a podcast? Somewhere between 1% and 40% may say, no, I didn't know. So don't even assume that everybody knows what you're up to and what you're about. Always have that, tactical, on the ground, inviting people, letting them know, and set realistic goals about your growth. Track it. Say, if you say, hey, I want to have 100 downloads for my first episode, 500 for my fifth, 1,000 for my 20th. Set those goals and then ask yourself, well, how am I going to get there? And then implement the strategies to get there.
All right, Jeremy, were you saying something?
No, I was just, when Joey was saying, like, unless you're like A-Rod or somebody like that, like, everybody out there like wants to be Joe Rogan. It's kind of sad in some ways. Like, like there's very few people that can have a show where they just kind of sit and talk about anything for 3 hours and people listen to it. So really try and create something that is about the people listening to you, and it's about helping them.
Absolutely. And right when we're talking about marketing, a lot of people asked while registering for the event as to, they're trying to get onto iTunes. So what is the right way of getting onto an aggregator platform for podcasts, and how to choose one? Should one try to directly get onto iTunes in the first stance, or all of them? So how should one go about it? Billy, can we start with you?
Sure. I mean, I think it's quite simple. You host the show on a hosting platform, and then you take that RSS feed and you distribute it to any of the directories. So quite simply, think of it from a perspective of, you have a media file, which in this case is an MP3. You upload it to a host. It could be Libsyn, it could be Buzzsprout, it could be Megaphone, it could be any number of hosts. They store your content and serve it up, and they provide you an RSS feed, which you then, and I like Buzzsprout because it's super simple for a beginner, and you just go and you could literally plant that RSS feed into all of the directories like Apple and Amazon and Spotify. It's super simple. I think the question is, once they're there, how do you then elevate them and promote them? And I think there's so many ways you can do that. You could create contests, you can talk to your friends and tell them about it. But ultimately, what you really want to do is you want to create something that people want to tell others about through word of mouth. Word of mouth is how your podcast will spread. So how do you make content that people want to talk about and share with their friends? And if you can inspire them to do that, that's when your show will start to take off.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd agree with that. I think about how I get new podcasts, how I subscribe. It surely isn't the search function, because even today, a lot of the podcast platforms, their search and recommendation features are a little spotty. So it's, hey, I was talking to somebody and they mentioned this, or a podcast I already listened to was promoting it on their podcast. So it's definitely that organic one-to-one kind of reach.
Absolutely.
It's always other podcasts for me too, Joey. Like I'm listening to a show and they mention a show or they have a bumper in the beginning and I hear it, or it's topical also. Like I'll be like, oh, okay, I want to learn about blah. So I found a 10-part series about Tom Brady. Like it's always like stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think what you're hearing from everybody is that word of mouth marketing is one of the most important marketing strategies for podcasts.
I agree. I agree to that. Absolutely. And we are 45 minutes into the session, and we must take we must do a mid roll before getting on to the monetization part of the podcast. I'm sure the attendees are waiting to listen to that as well. So let's quickly take a mid roll, and we will be back again to continue the session.
I've always been creative and always been an artist. As a young girl, I used to paint rocks and I used to sell them for a quarter on the street. And I just fell in love with it. It just grew into a passion of mine. I started looking on the web and I came across Designhill, and they had a design contest to design a logo, and I entered it and I won. And I was like, oh, this is really great. I can pick and choose what type of logos or design projects I want to work on. And it allows me to be creative, keep my hands, with my tools and working. So it's kind of nice. It's really easy to use. You can scroll through the projects and there's sections that you could go by. It's really easy. There's a few clients who have come back to use the one-on-one projects. There's one client in particular, she owns a vintage shop, and I designed her logo, and she came back. She needed a design for a flyer, and she really liked the illustrations that I did for her, so she came back a couple of times with projects. I would recommend it, especially if you're a designer that's starting out and you want to learn from other designers, seasoned designers. It's a place to keep in the game and keep using your tools. It makes me feel great, and it kind of confirms that I should be doing this. And I love to see logos that I've designed out, and proud of that. And I think that the clients are so happy that their logo represents what they do and makes them look good. It's a collaboration. It's good for me, and it's definitely good for them.
All right, so quickly, we need to discuss about the most important aspect of podcasting. Is at least it is an important aspect to our registrants who registered with us for this event today. We all know that with advertisements, sponsorships, affiliates, these are some of the ways to make money through a podcast. But let's say a business slash podcaster is already doing all of this and still not able to make a sustainable income. What are the things to be relooked at, and how to re-strategize the entire monetizing podcast? Jeremy, we can start with you.
Oh man, I were hoping you were going to start with me. So there was a old South Park episode back in like 2007 when YouTube first got popular, and they all thought like you just get on YouTube and you make all this money. So it was called the magical internet money. And people have this same idea around podcasting, right? They think they make a podcast, they get they get really big, and they make money off advertising. And I think that's totally the wrong strategy, because it's like less than 1% of shows are going to make a sustainable large income off of advertising. For me, like when you're looking at it, like doing affiliate deals and doing joint ventures is a really great idea. Like if your guests have something to sell and something to share, like you should make a percentage of that. That's one strategy you should be looking at. But the other thing is, I look at your podcast as kind of like the PR vehicle and the storefront for everything else you're doing. It creates trust, it creates networking, it helps you build that audience so that your business functions better. Like, yes, I think the podcast, and everybody else here may not agree with me on this, but like I think the podcast in itself is a vehicle to promote your business and be part of your business. I don't see it, unless you're one of those names that everybody recognizes as something that is a business in itself.
I 100% agree. And I'll just say this. Think of it like there's 3 buckets of podcasts. There's a passion project, or we'll call it a hobby. Then there's something that is what you've just described, Jeremy. And then there's the let's just face it, there's the Joe Rogans of the world and others who are household names who get thousands upon thousands of downloads, like 50, 60, 70,000 downloads an episode at least, or millions of downloads. The vast majority of people are going to be bucket one or bucket two. And so as you think about monetization, think less about sponsorship and advertising and more about how am I using this as a business development tool for my business. So if you're a coach or if you're a consultant, maybe your guest is your potential client, or maybe your audience is your potential client. So this is a creative way to think about your podcast as a way to generate revenue for your business. Okay. Now, I will say this. If you have a very niche show, meaning you have a very targeted audience, Harry Duran has a podcast on vertical farming. Okay. It's a very specific niche. You can potentially get a sponsor if you know exactly who's listening to your show, because then you can go to a sponsor, say like, here's my audience. And they know that their core demographic and your core demographic are aligned. And then they may float you some money, but don't expect to retire off of a single sponsorship. But do think that if you can get a niche that is very targeted and very specific, you then have a much greater chance of attracting people who want to put money towards your show because they know they'll reach that specific audience. And the last thing I'll share is, remember this, it's a long-term game with a podcast. To Jeremy's point, if you think you're going to start a podcast and in a few months that you're going to have it monetized, I promise that's very, very unlikely. Imagine taking your podcast, imagine throwing it in the ocean, and then you have to get a specific listener to go find that. It's the equivalent of doing that, because there's no clear distribution channel like YouTube. It's actually easier on YouTube. As hard as YouTube is, that's a clear distribution channel all within one thing. Podcasting is very hard to find your audience because you got to connect your podcast with the listener, and that legwork to connect those dots is on you, and creating something that people will want to share with others to find those listeners. Again, it takes time. You got to, what Jeremy's done is super impressive, 800 plus episodes. That's the kind of long-term vision you have to be successful as a podcaster.
Can I just add something to what Jeremy and
Please go
Billy have
ahead.
said,
Yes.
which is people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And if you are selling anything that involves knowledge and ideas, a podcast is a great medium to build that knowledge, likability, and trust with your audience. And that will strengthen your core business. So think about podcasting, again, as both Billy and Jeremy have said, it's a long-term effort. I've been podcasting for 7 years. I've also produced many hundreds of episodes. We're approaching 700 at this point. And it's a way to build that connection with your audience so that they're more likely to feel comfortable buying stuff from you that you already sell.
Tom, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, no, so I absolutely agree with everyone. It really is long term, 15 years doing this. But where I can, got a book out of it, get a number of things, right? But the real core of where it has helped the business is actually in terms of clients. And I can track at least a half a dozen really, really good clients back to, hey, you're that voice, you're that guy. And that connection, it was likability. It was someone that they said, oh, you know what you're talking about. And it was able to generate a nice chunk of revenue to the business. And again, that helped. I'm not sure I wouldn't do it in just any way, because there are some, but maybe I'm in that hobbyist bucket also at the same time that I am other places in the different buckets. But, again, long-term, think long-term, and this is not hitting the lottery unless you really get it.
Amazing, amazing. Joey, you're trying to say something, but you're on mute.
Yeah, I feel like the rookie here because I've got 280 some episodes across 5 years. We've done a once a week cadence. But the thing that I have learned, and we're doing some reimagining with our podcast too. So fun times in a couple months. But some of the best podcasters that I've seen that monetize have a consistent funnel that they're putting people into from the podcast. So one that I really like is I think her name is Jewel Solomon. She has the Influencer podcast or something like that. Uh, every show she's promoting this course. You know, if you like this topic, we cover this topic in some way in our digital course. So that puts people into a sales funnel where they can then be sold coaching, digital products, so on and so forth. So sometimes the monetization of your podcast isn't directly from the ads, it isn't directly sponsored episodes. All of that is great, but it's like, how are you moving people forward to spend with you? That is going to be a big way, because, like I said, we're not Joe Rogan, but even we consume Joe Rogan's content for free for the most
Absolutely.
part.
But
We haven't
but
talked
Joey, it's the
about.
best relationship building tool, my friend. People are spending a lot of time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's better than, a conference where even, people are sidetracked. There are other options and alternatives. People get to choose. Podcasting was Netflix before Netflix, because they're choosing when they spend their time with you. They're devoting their time to you. And so it's a really great tool to build that trust and credibility on another person's terms. But you always have to ask, like, what's that next step? How are we going to get people from the podcast to being more immersed in our ecosystem? So those are.
Sorry, go ahead, man.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
No, I'm so with you on this, and I think that the last thing I'll add as a tag in is give something of value away for free that you could point to as a lead magnet. Like, it's not hard. You give something away of value that people will want. To your point, Joey, I mean, there's no better PR and way to ingratiate yourself in the lives of other people, because they hear that vibration of your voice, they connect with it, and then they gain that trust. That is such a powerful thing to capitalize on if you have something that you could give them. And then, yes, they're in your funnel. You now have an ability to do anything with them that could be business related.
Yeah.
I want to add something back to the first point you made, Billy. I wanted to let everybody speak before I cut in again. But you were talking about, advertising, and you were saying, like, you're talking about the CPM model. So CPM or cost per thousand. So a lot of companies pay, like, I think it's like $15, $18 per 1,000 downloads. So if you're not getting 1,000 downloads, you won't make $15 to $18 per episode. So, like, one thing that I've taught people is, number one, you can do flat rate advertising. Like, you can say, like, all right, how much am I willing to do to make like $75 for this episode? Because at the same time, you are going to water down your content a little bit by bringing in an ad. So you decide what that value is. You find a company that's going to find it valuable, and you can reach out to them about, like, hey, it's $75 for this episode. Do, like, flat rate advertising. And then something we've also done as well, and I've worked with them for a couple of years now, is we've worked with AdvertiseCast for a few years, and they're really great at selling ad spots on your podcast, and they've been good to work with.
Amazing.
I'll just touch really briefly on something we haven't mentioned, is those membership sites like a Patreon. I know they work for a lot of podcasters out there. The reason why it didn't work for my brand is that you essentially have to put someone on it to run it. And we're focused on our clients. We're focused on, like, the podcast is a marketing tool. It isn't an entity in and of itself. And I think it works if you're looking to have an entity in and of itself. But surely if you have a small paying tribe of 10 to 100 people who are willing to contribute, $5 a month, $10 a month, $50 a month, whatever it may be, for the value that you've ascribed, you're creating your own little ecosystem of impact that is likely scalable, because maybe you're just releasing episodes a week early. Maybe you're, getting FaceTime with your team or the people that are subscribing. So it is something that's beneficial. Those sites doesn't work for us personally at this moment, but I think Kev on Stage has a Patreon, and it's working pretty well for him. But that's another thing to consider in the business of podcasting, is the membership sites, where you get something behind a paywall, and people will pay for that value if it's good enough.
Amazing, amazing. So we are already ahead of time, and it's such a wonderful session. Let's quickly take a few questions from the questions tab. Otherwise, the audiences would not like. Okay, so, and we have a lot of questions here. Jeremy, I think, has answered a few questions. Thank you so much, Jeremy. You have made it easier for us. All right, all right. Okay. So let's take. Okay, you've answered all of them, Jeremy. Okay, let me just quickly choose from.
You're muted, Jeremy.
All right, but I'm still gonna.
No, I answered like 2 or 3 of them, but I think like Tom's actually the legend here. He's like there's TC to a lot of these. He's been nailing them.
All right, I will ask this any which ways. So Semir asks this: what are the advantages of a podcast over video, where we can find stats on which demographics listen to podcaster are more likely to listen to podcast versus anything else? Did we get the question?
Yes.
Okay, Joey, would you like to answer this?
Sure. So,
Yes, please.
as you can see, I take video very seriously. I invest in it. But what we've found, even from, Podcast Business Journal will tell you that even for people that produce podcast videos, folks are listening to the video, but it's like squirreled away in another tab. So they're not really watching it. I think the value of video is that you can later repurpose it for other things. So your social media clips and things like that. If you have something where you need to demonstrate, maybe if you do product reviews or something, maybe video is helpful. But the video market by far and large isn't as big as the audio market. And you have to think about how people consume podcasts and where they consume it. Video requires a lot of bandwidth. Some people are downloading and putting it on their phone and then going. If you are reaching populations that don't have higher internet speeds, you have to be conscious of that because you're going to be a huge file for them. So audio is better for now, but maybe video will show its pros later.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel right now.
All right, thank you so much.
I surveyed my listeners a couple of times early on and found that most of them were consuming while commuting. As a rule, especially if they're driving, video would probably be bad. They were audio, and so therefore we've stayed with audio.
Great. Let's quickly address this one question which has not been answered already. It says it's again by Simel. How do you measure the impact of your podcast? David, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'm going to take issue with people that focus on number of downloads because when I'm asked the question about how many downloads do our shows have, the answer I usually give is, why are downloads important to you? And the answer that I hear generally does not support questioning the number of downloads. So you need to think about why a podcast is important to you and how you would what would success look like to you? Yeah. And then how would you measure success? So if a podcast, we've been talking a lot about how a podcast can support an existing business. And if that's your primary reason for starting a podcast, well, how would you measure increased success in your business as a result of your podcast? And it might be, as an example, you're going to create a whole new network of influencers who have been guests on your show. Which wouldn't come about without the podcast. And that actually has nothing to do with the number of downloads. So think about what's important for why you're starting the show or why you're continuing to host the show. And that will give you some clues as to what's important.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm looking at a few different things on this. So one thing is I have Google Alert set up for my name in quotation marks. And I do it in quotation marks so you don't get things that are relevant. So if, we're getting social mentions, if we're getting call outs in different places, if people are talking to me and contacting me, and, I've never had to pitch for a speaking gig. We've always got them from people I've met through the show. So if I'm continuing to make an impact, continuing to, talk to people and connect with people, to me, that's how I measure the impact of it.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I hope that answers your question, Simel. And I can see most of the questions have already been answered or already been covered during our chat for last 1 hour. So I'm going to skip the questions tab And I have a question. I have a one more question, which is about, the recent acquisitions that are there. So 2019-20 saw a number of acquisitions by biggies like, Spotify acquired Anchor, Joe Rogan. Again, we were talking about Joe Rogan and the Obamas. Amazon acquired Wondery. We recently had Clubhouse in beta, and so a lot of people and organizations, biggies, are stepping into this space. Does this mean that does it mean to ruin the hopes of an independent podcasters? I mean, how should the new podcasters that are there juggle through the biggies and make a mark for themselves?
I think
Tom, yes, yes,
I
please.
think these big platforms are going to be like rudely awakened, and I think Spotify's already kind of seen this with like what they were hoping for in stock price and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a very community driven and a very individual driven platform, and I think what they're trying to do is make podcasting something it's not, something that's driven by big companies, by big brands, and things like that. This is driven by individual creators. So I think no matter how hard they push that, they're going to have a lot of trouble trying to do that, because it's even like you look at what happened with iHeartRadio. They do their awards every year where they give themselves and their friends awards. Like, I don't listen to any of those shows. So I think it's really about, being community driven, and that's what we're going to continue to see, honestly.
I agree with Jeremy. So if you think of what podcasting stands for, it's personal broadcast. Podcast stands for personal broadcast. So to try to scale that at large, to take that outside of that scope of that one-to-one listener, it could come back to bite those larger brands. So I think that what this does, though, for the individual is it validates the medium of podcasting, because obviously there won't be the significant investment, these mergers, these acquisitions in a space where there was no future. But for the individual who's got their personal brand, got a corporate brand, who's swimming upstream, I just say jump in, start swimming, build your reach along the way, and you'll get where you need to go as long as you're following the tips that have been mentioned in this podcast session, and just stick to it and see what's changing.
Tom?
Can I
Okay.
add something? I agree 100% with what Jeremy and Joey have said. Keep in mind that podcasting is going to become cheaper and easier to do in the future, and it is about personal broadcasting. If you look at what's happened in other creative media fields, like streaming video, we haven't seen a consolidation of all streaming video going to fewer and fewer platforms. Actually, the number of platforms is increasing, and as technology makes it easier and easier for more platforms to be available, it will make it easier for individual creators to connect with their audience.
10 more years and we'll turn the corner and it will be owned by all large companies. So I disagree with all of my fellow panelists. I suspect, and if you look at other technologies, at all major, you go through this phase where the individuals blow out. We did this with the internet. And then about halfway through that cycle, it all consolidates down to a small number of organizations, creates their own oligopoly, and then we go through a period where they exist, and then something new happens. So we are somewhere in the late stage of this blowing up. It won't stay there forever. It will consolidate down. Governments will force it to consolidate down, just because they will want to control the message. All of this happens over and over and over in history.
I disagree respectfully, and here's why. Podcasting, I think
you have to be respectful.
it's I don't. This isn't the reason why we're here, but just think of a few things. I can only speak for America because of our laws and things. I know we've got an international audience tuning in, but we live in a space where there's free speech and there's a lot of pride on our individual liberties. Podcasting is a medium where what is being sold is the organic content that a person is creating. So it's not like you're selling telecom, you're selling data packages. You're essentially selling voices, views, and opinions. And it's such a stark contrast where if you look at the news media, folks are running away from the CNNs and the Foxes of the world to the independent podcasting voices that will share the news in either a neutral voice or in a voice that resonates with them more. So I think that podcasting is a unique space where what's being sold and bought is different. And I still don't think that those big brands have nailed down what is the pricing model that makes this, good for us. I think a lot of these mergers and business moves have been built on buzz and built on, getting subscribers to a platform. But that's only one play. And then even advertising, may or may not be a good play further on down the road for those big groups. So I don't think it's going to go the way of other things, but time will tell.
Time will tell, and I'll just say this. What I know for sure is that voice is the future, and there will be a lot more ways for people to hear voices. Clubhouse is a great example, and all the social media platforms are following suit. I'm very active on Clubhouse, and for good reason. I think that the delivery mechanism could change. I actually probably agree more with Thomas than the rest of the panelists, that I think ultimately, let's follow the money. There needs to be a delivery mechanism that will allow people to get paid. And there are standalone platforms that exist today, and there will be it'll be a fight to see who survives. I believe that, but none of us know for sure. But the Spotifys of the world and the Apples of the world, they ultimately they want to create content, much like Netflix wants to create their own content. And so I do see that being the model that would make the most sense. Even Clubhouse is a distribution channel. And so I'll be blunt about this. It's not you, Joey. I have the least experience up on this stage. I've been podcasting since 2019. I've barely done 100 episodes, but I've spent over the last 75 days more time behind the mic than I have the entire time of my podcasting doing Clubhouse. And I host very large rooms with thousands and thousands of people that come through the rooms. And it's because of the distribution model that exists because of Clubhouse. So my reach has grown exponentially because of a platform. And so, but it's an audio platform. I'm at Billy Samo. Somebody just asked. I'm at Billy Samo on Clubhouse.
I think I'm Joey V. Price HR on Clubhouse too.
All right. That's amazing. That's amazing. If there are any last thoughts, please go ahead and say, because we will have to wrap up the session now. Any last thoughts? Anything? So, what would be your advice to the newbies who are there in the podcast, who want to make it big in the podcast industry?
Just start.
Yes,
Turn your
that's a good
microphone on,
advice.
record.
Yes, start and be consistent. Obviously, we talked about consistent. It's not about making a podcast and then leaving it in the ocean. Like I'm sure one of the panelists said that as well. All right.
I would just say sometimes when we get into a marketing or getting in front of a camera, we try to hide our uniqueness. But really what's going to rally people around you is your uniqueness. So bring your full self, and you'll be surprised at who is going to rock with you. So.
Absolutely. Yes,
I would just say know your intention. What does success look like? Why are you doing this? And the more you know that, the better. And then I would suggest make your title boring and descriptive. When I say that, what I mean is don't try to get too clever or cutesy with your title. Think of something that when somebody sees your title, they know exactly what your show is about. I think that's a great way for you to get instant, more likely that people will click on it and say, yes, I want to listen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Billy. All right, then. This was indeed a value-packed session. We are actually at the end of this wonderful session with Billy, Thomas, David, Jeremy, and Joey. I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. And once again, I would like to thank each one of you for taking out the time to be a part of this event. We had around 50 live attendees, and the number has not dropped that much. We have 45. So a lot of people made it till the end, and that speaks a lot about, how lovely the session was. All right, guys, this is not where it ends. We have a lot more events lined up for you in the coming days. So if you guys are interested and haven't registered yet, my colleague Harshita will be putting up the event section link in the chat box. Please go ahead and register for yourself. To stay updated with events like these, you can follow us on our LinkedIn page. You can also give us suggestions on the topics you'd like us to cover and speakers you want us to host. I'm dropping the link of our LinkedIn page in chat section again. To watch this session and other such wonderful events, subscribe to our event section on designhill.com/events or visit our official YouTube channel at Designhill. You can find the link in chat box again. For all the designers and artists who are listening to this and wish to be a part of this thriving design community, visit designhill.com without any further delay. Last but not the least, we promised you we will reveal the secret coupon code. So if you want to build your brand, use a coupon code COPO15 to avail 15% discount on Design Hill contest service. So on that note, I would like to say bye to everyone who joined us here today. Take care, guys, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Boom shakalaka.